What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. My name's Jake. I'm here with my buddy Andre, and we're going to break down another self-development topic. And the one today is a really big one, and it's something that Andre and I both have some experience in and have connected over this idea, and that is the idea that luck is a skill. And luck in general, just the word luck, is pretty much pure garbage. And there's a lot of misconceptions about how luck works, and I think it distracts us from what's really important. Before we dive in, Andre, I'd love to just get your thoughts on luck and how you define it.
Right. So luck is definitely something that's misunderstood by everybody. And I think it has a lot to do with how everybody wants to have things be binary, even when things are not binary, right? Like there are elements of luck to all kinds of different things that we do. However, we can change our positive associations and negative associations with luck based on reframing like the merit versus random chance thing. And some of the things that change our exposure to luck in a good way is things like adding volume, understanding that there's going to be a lot of invisible things that happen that look like luck, and certain skills just really change your exposure to luck, right? We've got like your networking effect looks a whole lot like luck. It's not luck. That's a skill, right? And that binary thinking about luck, I think it has like people want to think, okay, something slightly lucky happened. So now all of the work that you did, all of the merit that you had is erased. And that's not true. Any hint of chance, people tend to disqualify it from having to do with your skill and your effort. So we need to change the way that we look at luck in order to, make it work for us a little bit.
Yeah, and on the other side of the spectrum too, we have the people that are going to, they see any hint of luckiness, right? And they say, "Oh, it's just luck." And then there's the other side of the spectrum where people are going to say, to an extreme degree, everything is your fault. Everything that happens, you are 100% in control of. And those both ends of the spectrum, in my opinion, are just not true. There's value in the taking ownership. Like it's a mindset it's probably, whether it's true or not, it's probably worth having that mindset, at least to some degree. But the world is probabilities. You can do everything correctly and still end up with a bad outcome in the short term. It depends on how, if you are continuously not getting the outcome you want, then maybe you have a bad strategy. But if you have a good strategy, luck is just how reality works. That's just probabilities playing out. Like you're going to, if you have a coin and it's slightly weighted on the head side or whatever the physics, I don't know the physics of it, but one side is a little bit heavier than the other, right? You have a weighted dice, you're playing craps or whatever. It's not always going to land on the one you want it to, but it's going to tilt in that direction. And that's just how the world works. And yeah, the weighting onto it, that's like, the things that are behind the scenes are, the invisible work behind the scenes that help push things help push the probabilities in your favor.
Yeah, for sure. There are all kinds of like core habits and core skills that weight the dice for you, right? Like the networking effect that I talked about, building up your communications and your empathy and all of those kinds of small things help you navigate things with like an advantage. Like every time you add to some of these core skills, you're adding to your advantage, right? And we want to be slanting things in our favor as much as possible. And there will always be an element of random chance. And that's not something we will ever be able to escape when we're navigating through life. It's just a part of it. But we can shift the odds for ourselves.
Yeah, and this is a good segue into something that we've both connected over, which I think is one of the most powerful. It certainly is probably the thing that's had one of the biggest influences how I approach the world, and that is the game of poker. Poker is you know, at face value, it's gambling, it's randomness. You played in casinos, and casinos are rigged. And poker is not a slot machine, right? Like poker is an actual. You can win at poker with the correct strategies and the correct mindset, and it just touches on everything that we're talking about. Where it's like there's the investment in the skill set. You have to understand how the game works, and the benefit of there being some luck involved, probability, actually plays in your favor because other people will continue to play that game even though they're going to lose. So you have an edge on them. If you really understand how the probabilities work, there'll always be people to come in and you can make money off of them because they're coming there to play and to gamble. Whereas you show up and if you're being serious about poker, you're playing to win and to make money. But it's something that plays out over the long haul. You have a strategy in place, you understand how the probabilities work, and sometimes you're going to get lucky, sometimes you're not, and that's just part of the game, is just letting those probabilities play out. So in you were probably, from my understanding, I think you were a bit more successful in poker than I was. I love poker with all my heart. I still play. And I came up as a kid. I ended up like poker was like I have a gambling family. Like I've always had a gambling family. We all love the casino. So I naturally fell into poker, and I liked poker because I lost less money doing it. And it also was like the time I was coming up around like when I was turning like 18 when I could go to casinos. It was right when No Limit Hold'em like blew up on TV, and it
Oh,
was like
yeah.
a professional sport, which I don't even know where that's at. I still see it on TV once in a while, but like it was really trendy and cool for a while to be a poker player. So it was like the perfect storm for me to get into this. And I dug into all the strategies and understanding pot odds and the different type of games, and weighing, being able to understand the probabilities of how much am I going to win, and is that worth the move I'm about to make, and then statistically playing that out over time in your head. I was never really good at doing the exact math in my head, but like just understanding the concept enough, I think gets you way ahead of most people when you're playing these types of games. And I will say the one thing that, like I said, I think you're more successful at it than I was, because I actually had to pull myself out of it. And I think this relates to the whole conversation about luck. Is luck is really having an understanding, having a strategy, and sort of like sticking with it even in the face of temporary failure, right? Because you're going to get unlucky. You're going to lose sometimes. And when you're doing in the game of poker, especially if you're dealing with like relatively large amounts of money that may emotionally impact you, it's hard to stay cool during it. And I had a few too many times in poker where maybe I pushed a little bit too far and I made a stupid decision, and it made me so mad that I had to like stop having the dream that I was going to like be a professional poker player and approach it more as a hobby. But that was a huge rant on poker. This episode isn't about poker, but there is so many skill sets, like so many good mindsets and skill sets that you can learn from poker. I'd love to get your take on poker.
Yeah, so I actually did it professionally for a number of years. I did it, I like developed the skill set in college, and then I ran into a mentor that really helped me to break down and understand poker. And I also leaned on my natural pattern recognition skills. So there's an element of that alongside the strategy and understanding the numbers and all of that. Like you said, it's not the episode's not about poker directly, but the lessons that we can take from poker, because if you look at statistics and probability and game theory and all of that, and you take it all into consideration, and then you look at the actual edge that you have over people in poker, it's not as big as you would hope for. Like it is very hard to accurately understand your edge. It's very hard to accurately understand how everybody else is approaching the game. It's very hard because the game tree is enormous. Like it's enormous. Like there's hundreds of different I call them nodes, but it's like decision points that come up pretty frequently. So with all of those different areas that you can have an edge, positive and negative, um, it gets really tough to navigate. And there were a bunch of things, a lot of things that I took from poker that I started applying all over my life. And that's like breaking apart my life into nodes, like game nodes, like and understanding my edge. And like I've played millions of hands of poker, guys. So it took me a long time to understand really what the ups and downs looked like. And as Jake alluded to earlier, how it feels. It feels like crap when you think that you're entitled to a certain outcome because you have a small edge. But in reality, if you look at the statistics and the math and you look at all of it taken together, it takes a long time for that edge to show up. And it's just such a good way to look at it when you apply it to other core skills and other core outcomes that you're looking for. Is that you need, like, I played millions of hands of poker. I had months where I lost a couple grand. I had weekends where I made $12,000. And it just took months. Like, I could be crushing the games and lose money. And it's just, there's no better demonstration of how to attack a complex game and be realistic with what probabilities actually play out like.
That's life. Like that is life in a nutshell. Is like showing up because like that's where I I backed out. Is like I couldn't show up consistently. I didn't have the mental and like emotional regulation that I needed. Like I can think of hands to this day that still drive me nuts. Where I was just like, I can't believe that happened. And the worst ones too are like the opportunities I had that I didn't act on. Whereas I knew I had a really good, I had set somebody perfectly up, and then like I couldn't execute on it for whatever reason. And then like afterwards, everything comes rushing back where it was like, what? I totally messed that up. And like, oh, so like the emotional regulation place and piece, and that is life. Like being able to, like we talked about some of those like the core skills, the invisible work, um, is like you need to break down the game. You need to understand the game just like you can with poker, whatever, game is a metaphor for whatever we're talking about, anything in life. You need to understand, you need to break it down, gather the information, understand the risks, understand the rewards, and do your best to assign some probabilities to it. Poker's beautiful because you literally can assign probabilities to it. There are unknowns, but you can attach numbers to it. Much harder in life, but you can. If you really sit down, you can just be like, well, what percentage do I think this will happen? Yes, it's a guess. It's better than nothing, right? You have to start with some sort of attach some sort of numbers. Just gives you a lot of perspective, and then do the work to set yourself up for success. So to give yourself that edge, and one is just showing up consistently with a strategy and implementing that strategy. And then, one sort of like side or like one deviation from that is like being open enough to be able to iterate on that strategy in the face of real information, like creating a feedback loop in your life.
Yeah. And like poker also taught me study feedback loops. Like there's a whole lot of requirement to set up systems to self-regulate. You talked about like dealing with the emotional impact of it. Um, it also taught me the need to follow through. Like you just talked about not being able to pull off your play on the river, I'm pretty sure. So, so like you have to come up with a strategy. You have to work work on executing your strategy kind of regardless because you do work off the tables, just like you do invisible work towards developing any kind of complex outcome or skill that you're looking for. And yeah, poker taught me the importance of volume, like millions of hands it takes to understand what your actual edge is. If you're going to do something like a podcast, you don't know if you'll be any good until you're 50 to 100 episodes in, and that's okay. You just need to think in terms of you need to get a sample size. You need to get enough iterations in to really understand how good you are and how good you can become. And like poker has a lot about trajectory, and it also like another really important thing is that your inputs do not match your outputs. They don't. And that's the most beautiful thing about poker is that understanding of probability and how over the short term things can not play out. And that short term can last quite a while, like more than you feel comfortable with, both in poker and in any other complicated thing. It took me years to recover from um, not developing my verbal communication skills. Years. Uh, you should be thinking about things in long term stretches when you're talking about like big, complicated games. Like if you're going to create a real business, you're not going to master that in 3 months. That's going to take you 5 years to become good at it or competent even. And to become good at it might take even longer. And it also depends on how many times you're doing all of the business actions. Like like a very apt business way to look at it is how many sales calls can I do? You know, and you can become better at closing. You can take some of those people that were like a 10% chance of saying yes and add another percentage point. And that how much does that change your bottom line over the course of a year? A lot, right? So what what we're I guess the kind of the point is that we need to slant things with our strategies. We need to think long term and get enough statistics to understand what's going on. And we need to be comfortable with the fact that the invisible work that we're using to slant things in the right direction for us will take a while to show up, but it will also be very exponential once it does.
Um, yeah, I'm like this is such a deep interest of mine is like getting that edge, and like I think a lot of it does come from poker, and I mean just like uh, gaming, like gaming the system. Like I'm always fascinated with that. It's like how can I just sneak in and just do a little bit here, a little bit there to just like tilt things in my favor. It's like it's really fascinating. And one
Oh,
thing that I've become sorry, what?
are you ready to get tilted? All right, here we go. Tilted is how you express that you're losing emotional control in poker, guys. Um, so the way that I got my edge was there's a website called Bovada, and it is an anonymous website, and you're allowed to play a short stack. So what I did was I crafted an entire game tree with the help of my mentor. He mostly did it, but I executed and iterated. And what we did was we forced everybody to play a game they didn't do studying for. And you can find those kinds of spots in real life. When you find those spots in real life, that's how you create like these big businesses or like just outsized returns in general. Is that's why there's a huge amount of importance in my opinion of going against the grain and picking something that suits your strengths. And there's just so much room for that. Like if you combine slanting the probabilities in your way, volume, general education, and making your own unique game, you're fucking unstoppable.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It reminds me of in some of my, there's maybe like the I don't want to say the negative side to some of this too is like since both of us gone down the poker route and it's very focused on probabilities, it can become easy to get too focused on numbers, right? And life is much more than numbers. Some things are not quantifiable, right? Like relationships are hard to quantify. There's a lot of things that are hard to quantify, but me being obsessed with numbers, I've gone down the rabbit hole of Monte Carlo machines a few times and how those can apply to life. So if anybody's not familiar with the Monte Carlo machine, I should have done some research because I'll probably explain them totally wrong. But essentially, there's some things are really hard to calculate. Like especially like they use them in physics a lot, where it's just the math behind an equation because there's so many variables and so many probabilities bouncing off of each other that it's just impossible to like it's not 2 plus 2 equals 4, right? There's a million variables going on. And instead of actually taking the time to understand that math, especially for somebody like me, because I'm not good at math at all, um, you can set up a simulation that takes in different inputs and it bounces all of these variables off together, and then it'll output probabilities of outcomes happening. So I think one of the most like obvious use cases for this is retirement planning. So like in my opinion, don't use a retirement planner system that doesn't have a Monte Carlo simulation. And instead of being like putting in these numbers and being like, well, I assume there's, X% inflation and X% return on an investment every year based on the stock market, historical returns. That's not how reality works. Like stock market's going to be high, it's going to be low, inflation's going to be high, it's going to be low. There's all these different variables coming in. And a Monte Carlo machine will essentially bump all the variables up against each other like millions of times or thousands and thousands and thousands of times. And then it'll output a graph of being like, okay, with this strategy, you're 80% likely to succeed. There's still 20% risk that you're not going to. And if you can, it's Monte Carlo machines are different. I mean, you can do these in spreadsheets and you can have programs to do them for specific use cases. But I just think the concept of a Monte Carlo machine is really useful when you're thinking about luck, because it's not about luck. It's about probabilities. That's all it really comes down to. And there's not perfect information in life. Like there's always so many variables going on. But if you can just start to think about it as a lot of variables bumping off of each other, and that if all those variables add up, that it's over 50%, or depending on the risk reward ratio, like it's trending in the right direction, you can get an edge in life in almost anything if you look at it that way.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And that's part of like I feel like there are two systems in play. There's the one you're talking about is like very very easy to understand because you're talking about retirement. But there's other things you can do to kind of like change where the floor is, like having a diversified portfolio of things that you're doing, right? If you have if you own an apartment building and you also have the traditional kind of investing, it changes, you get to adjust the potential outcomes. And when we're talking about life holistically, I think there are two things. There's that, and then assigning value to our life experience possibilities. Like we're not assigning a probability to it. We're assigning value to things that we're going to put above other things. Like when you become a parent, there's a lot of value in parenting time. There's a lot of value in ensuring that your kids are set up to be successful. They're set up to be relatively happy. And when you combine all of the probabilities alongside combining values to different outcomes you want, that's about as close as you can get to creating a real lasting edge on the entire life experience.
100%. And I think the other point that maybe is just worth drilling in on a bit, we talked about this, but I think it's worth going back to for a second, is volume. Like luck. If luck is a thing, which whatever, depending on how you define it, it is. It only shows up in the short term. Luck does not exist in the long term. It's not a long term thing. It's a word that explains how things don't always work out in the way they're supposed to in the short term, but in the long term they don't. And all that means is long term is just keep executing. Don't execute on there's some gray area here because you don't want to do the same bad thing again and again, again and again, and then luck is also going to not exist, but it'll push you in the wrong direction. But if you don't continuously try, you need to collect that data. You need to keep moving forward with a strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess luck is really just a perspective. Like it's how we try to make sense of random things happening in the world. And it is kind of directly tied to our experiences, right? So it's really just a perspective. And shifting your perspective on it can be pretty valuable for you.
Absolutely. Um, Is there anything else to talk about? I feel like we hit a lot of really good points. The only thing maybe worth discussing is if you're looking at, so, and it goes back to the poker thing too. When you're playing poker, you, it's probabilities, and you have to take these risks over time with the right strategy, and those will add up to something bigger. But there's also the sort of the in the moment figuring out the risk reward ratio. Like, you don't want to bet too much on any given thing, because then if bad luck strikes, you're wiped out. And that's definitely true in poker, but I think it's also true in life.
Yeah, that concept is called risk of ruin, right? And that is the most misunderstood thing when you talk to people who don't have a poker background. They're like, "Aren't you worried about losing your house?" I'd be like, "No. No, because I'm not betting my house." Like, what are you talking about? Every life is measured risks. That's all it is a bunch of measured risk-taking strategies. And you always want to take measured risks that have a potential for outsized rewards. Like, I would be playing the lotto all the time if I actually thought there was a positive expected value. But for every dollar you put in, you get like 60% back. Like, you get 60 cents, you know? So, what you're looking for, like, I can't think of anything that's more outsized risk to reward ratio than like playing with the crypto markets. Like, your chances of failure are huge, but your chances, like, if you hit that 10% chance of having like a 10 or a 20x, it's actually a positive expected value play, but you can't put your whole life savings in it because your risk of ruin is really high. So, yeah, I think it's very, very important to understand measured risk of ruin. When we go all in on something, you better make sure that you're actually willing to lose. And that's okay if you're willing to lose. That's why we try to have young people risk a bunch of time on like big pursuits, right? That's when the risk is low. Like, your risk
Yeah.
of ruin is what? You go back to ramen and then you go work at a McDonald's. It's not that bad, honestly. If you're young, you have support from your parents still, that's not a big deal. But if you're a family man, you have kids, you can't risk it all. You get to risk maybe 10% of your portfolio at most if you're talking in terms of money. And the same thing for time, but it's less quantifiable, you know.
Yeah.
So so
Yeah. And the Yeah, so I was thinking in my head, like, rub it in. Yeah, yeah, the family and like, and of course there's lots of benefits to that. But yeah, it does adjust your risk, like your risk, how much you can risk, your expected, your ideal risk levels that you can
yes.
take, and understanding where you're at in your life and what those are. Like, as dumb as a lot of the crypto bros are, and the Wall Street bets, like YOLOing their life savings, into it. They're young. Don't do it. It's a stupid decision. It's never going to pay off in the long run. But like, sometimes they do get lucky, and they're learning a lot along the way too. Um, yeah, it depends on where you're at in life. Like, it's okay to take risk, and you have to take risk. It's even okay to take a little bit of an uncomfortable risk if you've really thought through that. You can bounce back from that.
Yeah. Having that floor of competence and adaptability and resilience, it's so important because if you build all of your skills, your resilience, your adaptability, you can bounce back. And just make sure that when you're taking risks and you're trying to like gamify your life, so to speak, that you understand which things you value, which things you're willing to lose, and you make sure that you actually understand the bet that you're taking. Be comfortable doing all of the invisible work to kind of slant things in your favor. Um, that's what luck looks like, and you kill it with volume. That's how you get what you're looking for. You kill it with volume. It looks like you got lucky. but really it was just a whole bunch of work that nobody else saw.
Yeah, and that's okay. Let them think it's luck, right?
Yeah.
That just gives you more power over the situation. Other people are always going to see it that way, and then when people call it luck, you can just smile and say, I don't know, I'm just lucky. It's just the way it is, you know.
Yep. They don't have to know.
Yeah. This has been an awesome episode. Love all your thoughts on poker. I feel like we could talk about this forever, but it feels like we covered a lot of good points, and it seems like a good place to wrap it up. Unless you had anything burning to follow up with.
I think I covered all of the things that I want to cover. Take unequal bets that are in your favor, guys, but do it with the smart amount of resources.
Perfect. All
All
right.
right.
Thanks, everybody. We'll
Okay.
catch y'all later.
See you in the next one.